Catherine Taylor has been fighting a state voting regulation for 2.5 years. She's married but does not use her husband's last name, and that prevents her from registering to vote under current guidelines. To change all that, Catherine brought the issue to Alabama's Supreme Court justices on the grounds that the registration regulation is unconstitutional.
I found it personally humiliating as an adult to walk into a voter registration office and be told, well, you can vote, but only in this name, a name which has never been applied to me and I've never used. The reason I wanted to litigate the case is because I felt personally angry and upset, and I didn't want any other woman to ever have to feel that way again. I wanted any adult to have the right to use the name they've always been known by. I brought the case to court for everyone. I didn't do it for myself.
Catherine's husband, Robert Dean, stands behind his wife's issue.
Well, I think, in fact, it was my suggestion in the first place. Mrs. Dean I know best as my mother, and the woman I fell in love with was named Catherine Taylor, and that's the woman I chose to marry. And it never really occurred to me until quite close to the wedding that she might be thinking of changing it. I don't see marriage being at all related to names, and I was happy to be who she wanted to be.
Do you have children?
No, we don't.
If you decide to have children, will they have your name or her name?
Well, we've talked about that a good deal, and she feels strongly that they should have my name simply to make life for them as simple as possible.
Right now, Alabama is the only state in the U.S. that requires a married woman to register to vote under her husband's name. Catherine Taylor is very optimistic that the court will rule in her favor. A decision on the issue is expected within 3 to 4 months. From the State Supreme Court, Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
I think he'll play next year. I do. I think he'll play all season. He needs to prove to the pros that that he's physically well, and that he's okay. I don't think, though, I'd be surprised. I hope I'm wrong a little bit, but what I started to say, I don't think he'll play the redshirt year. I don't think he'll come back and play the extra year because he's a good student and a nice young man, and he looks like he's going to graduate on time, and I think he'll probably want to go on because we are talking about big dollars in his particular case. Yeah.
The top-of-the-line stereos and electronics equipment are made in Japan. The top-of-the-line appliances are made in the United States. Salesmen say the Japanese run a distant second behind this country in manufacturing washers, dryers, microwave ovens, and refrigerators. But salesmen add their foreign competitors lead the United States in stereos for the home and car.
For most stereo systems, the Japanese have the upper hand at least by 90%. When you get into your esoteric stereos, your much more expensive stereo systems, the American market is still very, very much alive in that particular area.
But salesmen are quick to point out that American appliances can't be beaten or touched by the Japanese. However, they add that American manufacturers must continue making quality products.
These manufacturers are not being complacent. They're doing their research. They're doing their homework. They know that the Japanese are over there on the other side just dying to come in, and they're building a better mousetrap, and we Americans, we're very fortunate. The appliance industry, I feel, will remain here in the USA manufactured as long as the manufacturers stay on top of it, and they are.
Salesmen add that stereo speakers and equipment made in America are top quality, but cost a few $100s more. But salesmen salute American-made appliances, which they say are like the Whirlpool logo. Quality is our way of life. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
You have, those of you who work in your veterans get support of legislation that you would have the state of Alabama. You would get a legislator in the House and one in the Senate that you feel comfortable, that you know what your needs are, and he would sponsor a resolution. Now, and it wouldn't make any difference which one passed, but he would sponsor a resolution concerning Veterans Affairs, and we would call it it would be a joint resolution, and he would ask the legislature to set up a joint committee on Veterans Affairs.
Albert, I hope you'll think about this sometime when you're setting rules.
To be with y'all today, I tell you, we're going to have to devise some kind of program here where I know it's getting late in the day.
During opening arguments today, prosecuting attorney Frank Hawthorne told the jury he expected the evidence to show that Jamie was beaten, kicked, and tortured by his stepfather. Attorney Bill Goldbrecht told the court the defense expects to show that the alleged injuries to the child were sustained during isolated incidents, and Jamie's death was not premeditated. Mary Doyle, a babysitter who worked for the Phelps, said she witnessed numerous beatings to the child at the hands of his stepfather. She also recounted a time the infant refused to leap from a dresser, and David threw the child into a crib for not following his wishes. Mrs. Doyle also testified that Mr. Phelps used drugs, including marijuana and LSD. Dr. Robert Gilchrist said when he performed the autopsy on the infant, he noticed a large number of small bruises to the child's body and head. Dr. Gilchrist says Jamie died from a massive blow to the stomach. The jury has been sequestered in the case by Judge Randall Thomas. It's expected the trial will last several days, and the prosecution will present a signed confession by Phelps as evidence in the case. Reporting from the Montgomery County Courthouse, Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
The scene is the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta. The characters, John Carroll, attorney for Alabama prison inmates, and Attorney General Charles Graddick. The plot, release of more inmates. Carroll, Graddick, and their delegations met before the three-judge panel to argue for and against releasing more inmates from Alabama's prisons to help ease overcrowding. Carroll says he's confident he'll win because questions the judges asked indicated they thought Judge Robert Varner was correct in ordering a release because there are constitutional violations in the prison system.
I think the questions went more to did he use the proper remedy. Judge Joe Flatt seemed to think that he should have held the governor in contempt. I think no matter what the 11th Circuit does with this order, that ultimately we're going to win on this issue. I think that the 11th Circuit is eventually going to say whether it's the governor or Judge Varner, they got to get the people out of the county jails and do it quickly.
Graddick, too, is confident of a victory.
It's my personal feeling from the hearing today that they felt that Judge Varner absolutely did not have authority to do what he did, releasing criminals by way of a habeas corpus. And secondly, that he exceeded his authority in the intrusion of state administration.
Graddick says both cases will probably be sent back to Varner with special instructions from the court on how to handle future releases. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News, Atlanta. "20 minutes. That's how much time inmates attorney John Carroll and attorneys for the state had to argue their case. But the question of releasing more inmates didn't appear to be uppermost in the mind of at least one judge. What did was the method for that release.
They really concerned themselves more with whether or not the second order, which dealt with Judge Varner saying that he wanted to put people on parole, whether or not he had that remedial authority under equitable type relief. And obviously there were other less intrusive type remedies that Judge Varner could have made.
We were encouraged by the fact that the question seemed to assume that Judge Varner was correct, that there are constitutional violations in the system. I think the questions went more to did he use the proper remedy. Judge Joe Flatt seemed to think that he should have held the governor in contempt. That's a position we disagree with, but that's what makes lawsuits.
Did Judge Varner exceed his powers in ordering the release of more state prison inmates? And that question should be answered by the appeals judges within about a month. For now, both parties are confident of a victory, but they both say they'll more than likely appeal if they lose. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News, Atlanta.
Krebs says crime in the nation is growing and costing citizens a great deal of money, over $200 billion just last year. But Krebs says there is a way to fight crime through an organized and effective system of law enforcement. Krebs spoke to the Capital City Kiwanis Club today and told members too often law enforcement costs a lot of money and produces few results.
You can throw money at a problem, but unless you have the right people in the right place acting the right kind of way, you're never going to get any results.
Krebs says the key to fighting the waste of tax dollars and crime is to organize state agencies and businesses to fight one thing that takes money from both.
The most important law enforcement officer in this state is the very next police officer that makes an arrest. The most important prosecutor in this state is the very next one who goes into a courtroom representing the state's interest. And it's incumbent upon this state to make every resource it has available to them.
Krebs says the governor's task force on white-collar crime, which he heads, has done a lot to reduce that sort of crime in Alabama. And now, when the words government regulation are unpopular, Krebs still says regulation is still an effective way to control crime without significantly holding back business. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. Krebs spoke to a group composed mainly of businessmen yesterday, and that's where his message hit the hardest. Krebs says white-collar crime and organized crime are taking a big bite out of our economy, eroding the public trust in business, and making it even harder for a legitimate businessman to operate. And that was just a prelude to his real message. At a time when federal government involvement in state activities is decreasing, it's going to take the combined efforts of business and state government to keep economic crimes at bay.
How is it that you, as legitimate businessmen, can compete with a thief who promises his clients a 600% return on their investment inside of 12 months?
Krebs says 1980 figures showed Alabama to be the third most corrupt state in the nation. Changing that for the better, Krebs says, will take, among other things, realization that economic crimes are no different from any other crime and should be punished just as severely. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
We're talking about preserving just
The Commission's decision comes after a meeting with Montgomery County judges and the District Attorney's Office. The commissioners were told that there's a definite need for more courtroom space and office space for the DA's office. The new partial court facility would tie in with the new jail that's already been authorized. Representatives from Pearson, Humphreys, Jones and Associates say the plans for the new jail would be held up unless the commission decided whether to build the new court building, since the two will be connected. The commission also decided to hire AmSouth as financial consultant for the project. In other action, the commission has decided to take a stronger stand on the Montgomery County Pensions and Security building. The commission plans to notify the State Department of Pensions and Security that it doesn't feel the building is worth making repairs recently recommended by the fire marshal. But the commission will make those repairs if the state agrees to reimburse the county. If not, the county's offer still stands to sell the building for $1. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
January 1978, an explosion ripped through downtown Auburn, destroying a number of buildings. December 1981, another blast demolishes half a city block of Sylacauga, injuring 3 people. There have been 38 natural gas-related accidents in Alabama since 1975. They killed 11 people and left 21 injured. The cause of the devastation was traced to gas leaks and the use of cast iron pipelines. An investigation by state gas pipeline safety officials revealed a life-threatening situation affecting thousands of Alabama citizens. At the core of the problem is the pipe once thought by engineers to be the safest in the gas delivery business. Cast iron pipe was widely used in most city-owned and some private utility operations. And so, Alabama's 114 city-owned and operated gas systems ended up with cast iron pipe. In many cases, that pipe is now 50 years old, and much of it has lost nearly all of its metal content. And when that happens, the potential for disasters like Auburn and Sylacauga increases dramatically. Larry Waldrop is director of the Alabama Public Service Commission's Gas Pipeline Safety Agency. He's worried about the existence of cast iron pipe on some gas systems.
We're trying to get all systems to have a program of phasing out their cast iron because they are going to have trouble with it. And lots of times, just looking at the pipe with the naked eye, you cannot determine that. It has to go to a laboratory and be analyzed with machines and microscopes and whatnot to tell that all iron in that pipe has left it. And it's nothing really but a shell that has no strength at all.
3,200 miles of this state's gas pipeline is the dangerous cast iron, and most of it is located in downtown areas of more than 110 cities and towns. And at this point, because of several other problems, including funding, nobody knows when or where another gas pipeline disaster will occur, but others are expected. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Dr. Randolph told ASU students and faculty that the university has gone through some difficult periods since its humble beginnings as a high school in Marion, Alabama in 1866, but he says it survived and will continue to do so despite an impending challenge.
A national government seemingly disinterested in the problems of higher education. that through its new federalism is advocating states' rights. Some of you my age and older should identify what is really being talked about.
Dr. Randolph criticized state government as well.
Leadership in the governor's office that has made it clear, at least to me, that it does not favor the continued existence of Alabama State University as a free-standing institution. The governor does not seem to understand that you cannot keep a man down without staying down with him.
Dr. Randolph urged faculty members to set higher goals and standards for the next 5 years in an effort to help keep the university strong and the quality of education high. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Board member Dr. Ralph Higginbotham is chairman of the committee studying correctional education. Higginbotham explained each of the 4 resolutions up for adoption. 3 were passed. 1, dealing with technical and junior college jurisdiction responsibilities for prison education, was carried over for further study. But the discussion centered on funding for new prison programs. Board members say educating inmates isn't part of the State Department of Education's responsibility, and so funding for tuition and books should come from the general fund rather than the Special Education Trust Fund. Under the resolution adopted today, the school board decided the junior colleges and technical schools should no longer have to pay for inmate instruction, and they're going to ask the legislature to make prison education a general fund item. Also, a new prison education facility would be built at the Fountain Correctional Center in Atmore, and both Alexander City State Junior College and J.F. Ingram State Tech would, through a joint project, build a facility for new and existing correctional education programs in Elmore County. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
The question was over the legality of the Fannie Mae Plan 2 loans, which allow variable interest rates for mortgages. State Senator Sonny Callahan asked for the opinion after some people questioned a provision of the plan that allows any unpaid interest to be added to the principal of the loan. Here's how that would work. Under Fannie Mae Plan 2, the interest rate on the loan is adjusted by the lender, either up or down, usually every 6 months. But the homeowner's monthly payments are adjusted only every 3 years or so. Now, if the interest rate goes up, the homeowner's monthly payments won't cover the new higher interest, and under the plan, that unpaid interest is then added to the principal up to a maximum of 125% of the original amount. But in his opinion, the Attorney General pointed out the fact that there's another side to the coin. If the interest rate on the loan is adjusted to a lower rate, the homeowner will be paying an excess interest, which then can be deducted from his principal. So Graddick's office concludes that the loans are equitable and lawful because the legislature removed limitations on the amount of interest a person may agree to pay on loans of more than $5,000. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
70% of the parents, students, and members of private industry who completed the proposed Magnet Technical School survey say there's a need to increase vocational education in Montgomery. Right now, there are a number of classes like tailoring, auto mechanics, child care, and brick masonry that are in big demand. In fact, school officials say there are usually waiting lists to get into these classes. But even with the increased demand, state and federal funding may be cut drastically.
At the present time, we can't answer that locally because it depends on our local legislation. There is some battles between various peoples to cut everything at the local level. They're trying to cut it at the state level. We know that at the present time there could be cuts from the federal level from 25 to 40%. And this will filter down to us.
Newen-Swander says the trend is moving toward placing more and more of the financial responsibility on the local school systems. But he says the local system doesn't have the money to totally fund vocational education. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Get your drink can out of there.
It will depend on how well they do. I've been able to place about 1 year. And these are like advertised journal, so things like that. We've got more people paying attention to the foods we have, but we win competition somehow in passions too. I try to get
One of those things we got caught in, you know, there's a lot of Vietnamese people in the school system. We made that Vietnamese report card.
We haven't run them yet. We're having problems on keeping the dead and blue meat. It'd be a lot easier if I can do it down here, because I'll have to use the sack on my I don't like those things to get out with those blades. Whoa, better go out the back door. It's open. Yeah, you better get that stuff done if you got some more.
As Montgomery attorney Vanzetta Durant appeared before the council, it appeared there might be strong opposition to the march from the audience in the council chambers. Several members of the Ku Klux Klan were on hand, but the only vocal opposition to the march came from the council itself. Councilwoman Elise Reynolds questioned the march simply because she said the police protection for the marchers would cost the city a great deal of money and asked if the march could be shortened. Montgomery Mayor Emery Fulmer followed up Reynolds' comments by saying police overtime for officers to watch a crowd as large as the one expected, several hundred people, cost almost $500 an hour. Ms. Durant agreed to shortening the time of the march by a full 5 hours, but asked for some changes herself in the proposed permit. Among them, she didn't like the route the marchers would have to take through town. She wanted the group to be allowed to end the march with a walk up Dexter Avenue to the Capitol steps. Reynolds objected to that also, saying it would mean problems for local businessmen if Dexter Avenue was tied up all day in a march. After considerable discussion by the council members and Ms. Durant, it was decided the march would be allowed in town, but it would not be permitted to go up Dexter Avenue. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Well, what it really means is that we will be pumping into the economy about $2.3 million per week in unemployment, extended unemployment benefits. It means that there are about 30,000 people that will be drawing benefits that have exhausted all of their benefits under their other claim.
My initial reaction is one of relief, relief that it's finally known that I am innocent, the same innocence that I have maintained from the beginning. I've had 2 polygraph tests which have attested to that innocence, and I'm just delighted now that the public should know that I'm innocent and I can resume my life and go back to work.
Case Western Reserve University and the University of Michigan.
Those who may oppose us simply do not understand the magnitude of our strength of purpose. Yet we must understand that the environment, the world of the 80s, demands a posture, a set of standards, a quality of excellence different in its intensity than that faced in previous decades.
Checks. During December of 1981, some 37 counterfeit checks. So I understand the coloring was off a little bit. The use of the numbers was not correct. Certain numbers are used in certain ways on these checks. They all have significance as to where they're placed, the size of them, and the variety of them, those type things.
We've learned that a number of city-owned and operated gas systems in Alabama are considered by state gas safety officials to be unsafe and potentially dangerous. We got this list from official sources who ask not to be identified. Athens Gas Department in Athens, Atmore Utilities Board in Atmore, Berry Gas Board, Camp Hill Utilities, Chilton County Gas District in Jemison, the Cordova Gas Board, the Dadeville Gas Board, the Dora Gas Board, the Maplesville Gas Board, the Mount Vernon Gas System, Oakman Gas, the Parish Gas Board, the Vena Gas Board, the Watley Gas System, and the Wilton Gas System. Part of the problem state gas safety officials see is the lack of trained people operating the systems.
The federal regulations which we enforce would take somebody that's able to comprehend what they are reading and put them in force and keep proper records on their gas system. We do have small systems in the state of Alabama that are not capable of keeping proper records and doing a proper job.
The solution is stricter laws spelling out who can operate a local gas system. In addition, these smaller systems need more funds to allow them to hire trained people and to replace existing cast iron pipe with safer materials. Until that's done, the specter of blasts such as the ones that hit Auburn and Sylacauga will remain a dark cloud over this state. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
It's really cold. Darren Day. Guarding Williams. Johnson from 18 feet. And he gets it coming into the season, but as indicated, this is only his 6th start of the season. Ran into San Marcos High School. Point guard backing up Jock Hill. That's Ken Johnson. And footer for his 6th point. Very good. Take it to the hoop. And it is Williams. Baseline. Feeds off. It is Johnson, and he gets the basket. 2 seconds remaining in the half. A big hoop. Holton fires it. Half court. Doesn't go. And surprise, surprise.
The director of the Alabama Department of Industrial Relations, Franklin James, says the extension of benefits is for unemployed persons who have filed for unemployment compensation in the last year and whose benefits have run out. James says another requirement for receiving the extended financial help is that applicants can't be receiving any other form of unemployment pay. Normally, unemployed workers can draw a maximum of 26 weeks compensation. The extension will provide an extra 13 weeks of unemployment benefits to those who qualify. James says the extension was spurred by prolonged high unemployment figures.
Well, what it really means is that we'll be pumping into the economy about $2.3 million per week in unemployment, extended unemployment benefits. It means that there are about 30,000 people that will be drawing benefits that have exhausted all of their benefits under their other claim.
How long the extended benefits will be offered is unknown. It depends on whether unemployment goes up or down. December figures showed Alabama's unemployment rate just over 12%. And though January figures aren't in yet, James says he expects them to show Alabama's unemployment rate is still rising. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
One way to verify the rumors of cheating is through a commission appointed by the governor to study the problem. Board member Ron Krill made that recommendation, saying cheating is another negative image clouding the entire state school system. Board member Victor Poole says the stories of cheating are strictly rumors, but he did tell of an incident in his district.
And I just got in the car and went out to see the superintendent to see what the problem was. His answer to me was that, well, I'll just tell you what happened. When I got here, came aboard as superintendent, I found this test being in the school system being taught, and I took it up, and we're going to start all over in this county, but at least I don't know where I am.
The students are scheduled to be tested in 4 months, and Governor James says necessary action must be taken now to ensure that exams are given fairly to all students. James also told the board the lower 30 percentile of school systems failing the test must be studied to find out why the students aren't passing. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
We're beginning to tap industry and the firms in the community. And in doing this through what we call a craft or advisory committee, we find people who are interested in our employment. An example, in welding. If we get people here in town that will hire welders who will come out here in an advisory committee, talk with our teacher and our teacher with them, and they see the need, then they are gracious enough to share with us some of their products, some of their parts, some of their raw materials, and out of that then we can pick up and keep our program going. In other words, it comes back again, the local people are helping us.
Even though House members aligned with education forces and a 16% teacher salary increase had a majority of the votes, the House leadership supporting the governor's proposed 14% pay raise managed to delay the final vote. Representative Jimmy Holley was able to maneuver a 16% pay increase for teachers combined with a 14% increase for state employees back into position. But he spent most of his day defending the size of the increase and rallying his allies to vote down a series of amendments and parliamentary maneuvers that would have diluted or killed the measure. Representative Rick Manley accused Holley and the others of supporting a pay raise that would put the education budget and the general fund budget in the red, or fund the increases at the expense of education programs and services. The education forces almost boxed themselves in when they adopted an amendment increasing benefits to retired teachers and employees. That measure would have forced a 4/5 vote of the House, a vote education forces felt they couldn't overcome, so they quickly repealed the amendments. Apparently tired of waiting out those series of amendments offered by the House leadership, the members voted to go home tonight, delaying until Thursday any further consideration of the measure. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Under the new budget plan submitted to Congress Monday by President Reagan, basic educational opportunity grants will receive $1.4 billion in 1983, a 38% reduction from this year. Guaranteed student loans will receive $2.5 billion, a cut of about 26%, and students receiving the loans will now have to pay a higher origination fee. Graduate students will have to borrow at a higher rate of interest, and all students will be submitted to a needs test. This year, only students whose families make over $30,000 a year had to prove need. But clearly the hardest hit student program in the new Reagan budget is campus-based aid. The administration is recommending only $400 million for that program, about a 60% cut from this year. And all of the money recommended for campus-based aid programs will go to college work-study. National Direct Student Loans and Supplementary Education Opportunity Grants will be eliminated. All of this is proposed in the Reagan budget. It won't necessarily come out of Congress the way it went in, but schools around the state are looking at what the Reagan proposals could mean. We'll look at how local schools might be affected by the Reagan budget, including one school where over 3/4 of the students receive federal aid in the 10 o'clock report. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Jealousies, where little artists, which I refer to when I say artists, which are those people, and you can define them any way you want. Some communities are artists and must be counted. Exhibiting, sponsoring organizations whose primary purpose has to do with cultural activity. This business committee is primarily interested in crafts. May have all sorts of community service programs, but of course to get from where you are to where you want to be. When I think the business combine those 4 areas of activity, planning is really very simple. It's like reading a map.
The governor talked about everything from the state of the economy to education reform. However, he directed most of his attention to the current budget that is pending in the state legislature. He expressed anger towards both the House and Senate concerning the isolation law passed last year that is supposed to put a priority on the passage of the budget.
The isolation bill designed to see that taxpayers' dollars were spent and spent right for decades to come is being frustrated by some characters on Goat Hill that for some reason do not want that to happen, and I will be calling those names in the days ahead.
Governor James also had a few words to say about the state employee pay raises which he has recommended.
He said, Governor, you should have recommended 10%, 11%, then they would have said 18%, and you might have compromised with 14%. I don't operate that way. 14% is right. This state can afford 14%. It cannot afford 16%.
While on the subject of pay raises, the governor also addressed the issue of employee benefits, which currently cost the state $500 million a year.
You send us $2.4 billion down here. Do you know that before we pay the first school teacher, fix the first pothole, that we got to pay $450 million off of the top for fringe benefits and retirement programs? I want our public employees to have good fringe benefits and a good retirement program, but I also want the day they retire to know that their money will be there, and this state cannot afford on its persistent course without making some changes.
The governor told the cattlemen that the main issues facing the state must be met head-on, and says the only way to make positive changes is for the public to become aroused and involved. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The governor's proposed pay raises would increase teacher salaries by 14% and state employee salaries by 10%. But if Senator Bishop Barron has his way, the teachers would get 16% and state employees 14%. One difference in the Barron version of the employee pay raise would call for 10 of the 14% to be funded from the general fund, while the 4% balance would be absorbed by each individual state department. Barron's bill flew without opposition through the Senate Finance and Taxation Committee. Senator Hinton Mitchum won approval of a bill that would provide an increase in benefits to retired teachers to be funded from the retirement system if it can afford it. The tab for the increases would be transferred to the Education Fund the following year. One other major bill approved by the committee would put all 67 of the state's tax assessors and collectors on a minimum salary, taking them off any fee systems. The Senate Education Committee approved a bill in the governor's legislative package revamping the Alabama Commission on Higher Education. Although the bill faced little opposition in committee, it's expected to draw some heavy fire from higher education forces once it reaches the Senate floor. The House Commerce and Transportation and Utility Committee considered 3 bills affecting the Public Service Commission. The only bill approved would allow the PSC to order a utility to reduce its rates. The committee postponed a vote on a bill that would stop utilities from passing the cost of advertising on to its customers. The third bill, tying utility executive salaries to that of the governor, was narrowly killed. The governor's salary is $50,000 a year, lower than the salary of many utility executives. All 3 of the bills were backed by PSC President Billy Joe Camp. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The Reagan cutbacks to university students range from 26% for guaranteed student loans to 60% in campus-based aid, and local university leaders are beginning to consider what the figures mean. At Auburn University in Montgomery, 30% of the 5,000 students receive federal aid in one form or another, adding up to about $3 million a year for the school. At Troy State University in Montgomery, about 26% of 2,100 students receive federal money, meaning $500,000 to the school. Huntington College has an enrollment of about 700 students. About 30% receive federal aid, $390,000 federal dollars for the school. But the school in Montgomery hit hardest by the cuts will be Alabama State University. Of the 4,000 students on campus, 87% receive federal aid. It adds up to $5 million for ASU each year, a quarter of the university's budget. A spokesman for the school says officials there are already looking for ways to trim expenses since state authorities have recommended level funding for the school next year. That means ASU will get the same number of state dollars in 1983 as it receives this year. Officials at ASU say if the Reagan budget emerges from Congress the way it went in, it could mean students leaving, staff and faculty dismissals, program closures, $1 million+ loss to the school. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
The action that is decided on work, we have to know more and more facts about the arts, the fixed, firm, etched in process. You need also to establish one, and probably the most important, are the artists and the arts organizations in a community. The second component that is necessary to a healthy cultural life in a community are audiences. People who are interested in sharing what it is that the artists and the arts groups create. Where there were territorial jealousies, where literally there was no commitment where you are to where you want to be. What I talked about. As I understand it, this committee know enough about the spaces that are available and the places. There are.
I am proud of you beyond belief. Every time we have this opportunity, in putting up with the strains of the job. We appreciate it. To you that have been... Okay, thank you, sir. Congratulations. Please. But and we doing this. Send them to us.